So, hey guys, today we're going to be just talking about interactions in general in Yu-Gi-Oh! So, if we just take a look at a few different cards, we have, for example, Nibiru. Nibiru was like an impossible to deal with card for the longest time, right? So, let's say we're playing some sort of combo deck. It doesn't matter particularly what combo deck, but general idea is, well, for example, with Blackwing, if you did a Blackwing combo, there's no point where you can set up a negate or anything to prevent yourself from getting Nibiru'd. So basically, you're cooked, and this includes after the support, right? And even before then, there were a lot of decks like this where you could just get completely rolled by Nip. And this left you with the choice of making a really mediocre play, predicting your opponent has Nib, because there's technically no actual tell if your opponent has Nibiru till, at minimum, you summon 5 times. Like, regardless of chain on or chain off or auto chain or anything like that, you have to summon 5 times for any information regarding specifically the Nibiru. Like, you can assume they have Nibiru because they're holding on to their other hand traps to save them for later in the duel. That's pretty much all you can do, right? And to put it in other words, if you are going first and your opponent has Nibiru, there's borderline no way for you to play around it. So the one way you can deal with this generically, well, the most reasonable way was for you to cross out Designator a Nibiru, which requires you to also be playing Nibiru, which your opponent can't counter, giving them more reason to also play Nibiru and cross out Designator, oddly enough. But also, even with crossout designator at 3, if you can do some basic maths, there's a 30% chance that you even open crossout designator, and for the most part, there shouldn't be like Lancia being played during this period of time, so there's no worries of like, I guess, Lancia to play around designator so you can resolve Nibiru. Like that's just crazy talk. And I mean, you just have Ash Blossom and other cards like that to bait out the Crossout Designator anyways, so you're solid in that regard. But yeah, there was basically no way for you to play around Nibiru until around, I would say, like, Sprite and Tearlament dropped. So with Sprite, you have like Gigantic Sprite, you have Sprite Red, both options that will completely prevent Nibiru from being activatable. Notably, Gigantic Sprite prevents the special summon of any monster above like level rank Link 2. And then with Sprite Red, it's just a monster negate you can drop really early. And then on top of that as well, you have Tearlament, which works kind of in a scuffed way. If you think about how fusion summons worked before Tearlament, essentially you would have to special summon more or less bow fusion material, and then like I'm pretty sure that the idea with this would be something like we special summon or normal summon a guy, and that guy special summons another guy, and then that guy grabs us like a fusion spell or something. Maybe like a polymerization or an archetypal specific polymerization-esque card, something like that, and then you would fuse the two guys together, right? And at that point, when you special summon the fusion monster, your first fusion monster here, this would be your third summon. So by the time you special summon another fusion monster, so in this case your second one, so the first one is probably some kind of combo starter. Usually that's what the first extra deck monster typically tends to be. It's not an interruption most of the time, I would say. So then sixth summon, if Tearlament also worked like that, would actually be Rukalos, allowing you to be Nibiru'd before Rukalos could drop on the field, except that's not how like Tearlament works. So we normal summon Rhino, we send a card to the graveyard. So our second summon is actually going to be Kalos, shaving off, I guess in this case, one whole summon. And then when we special summon Rukalos, this will be summon, let's see, summon 1, 2, and then you can kick Hellas effect directly, or you could get Tier Cash and special summon this as more or less your third summon, right? And then Rukelis is actually the fourth summon. So to put this simply, this hyper plays around Nibiru. And of course, even if you did activate Nibiru, you don't actually trade anything, making this even worse because Rukelis just special summons itself back, or it can just not send itself. Because it can send just a Tearlament card. So, for example, you could send Soliak to then search Avnis for next turn if you really want to. Like that's just a thing you could do. But yeah. So if we look at interaction at, well, in this game, I would say it depends on the meta or what is meta because it changes over time. But in general, I'm going to just say straight up, every single card in this game is completely broken and super oppressive, or it's completely unusable and does absolutely nothing. And it feels like there really is no in between. That's basically how it is. And it's not like consistent either. It's kind of like case by case, like with Nibiru, right? So if you were playing Blackwing, the kind of method you would have to play around Nibiru, there are two methods I would say with post support Blackwing, where you have either you have option A, you end on kind of like a half board, and you do not summon your copy or copies, depending on the exact situation of your Blackwinged Assault Dragon, then you just pass. And if your opponent nibs you, then you summon it. If they don't nib you, you just pass, and you still end on like whatever guys you happen to have on your board, basically. Which is kind of giga dumb, but you know it is what it is. And then I believe like Malice, for example, right now should be able to be giga railed by the Rock here, and Ryzeal, I think, is also going to get really railed by the Rock in general compared to before, because you have less copies of your Ryzeal monsters, opening you up, well, to get Nibiru more than before. So in this case, you don't have Apollosa to protect you from the Rock anymore, and that's how you get completely rocked in Malice, I guess. So I have more examples. So this is just a hand trap example, but of course, like we can go with one of the classic hand traps. So we'll just go through two Ash Blossom examples real quick. So we have Branded Fusion, where Brand Fusion or Branded in general could feel completely useless against Ash Blossom Joe Spring, because all of your cards, basically all they do is they search Branded Fusion, and then this is just your combo where you activate Branded Fusion and then you do whatever your combo is. So if your opponent has Ash Blossom Joe Spring, Brand Fusion cannot resolve even if you search for a Branded Lost. So yeah, your deck does essentially nothing. But then, of course, your Ash Blossom Joe Spring can do nothing if your opponent opens either Called By or Cross Out. So if we flip the script here, whenever you would Ash, it just genuinely doesn't matter anymore. Like you could try ashing to prevent your opponent from searching Branded Lost, so they don't get like maybe an extra negate or two off of Branded Fusion. But yeah, if your opponent has Called by the Grave, your Ash Blossom Joe Spring never mattered, because if this was your only hand trap, then you know they can just Called by it, and yeah, there's nothing you could have done. No matter when you would have activated it, Called By could also be activated. So yeah, there was essentially nothing you could have done. But if your opponent did not open Called By the Grave, what could they have done about Ash Blossom Joe Spring in this case? Absolutely nothing. And yeah, that's a big problem in Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess, where your opponent is doing something and you can't do anything about it at all. Just in general, I guess. And then let's go with one more example with Ash Blossom. So now Ash Blossom used to at least trade 1-for-1 with a lot of different like cards and decks, right? But okay, where in the world can I actually Ash Sword Soul? So that if we open Sword Soul of Moyi, then you know, normal summon Moyi, reveal a worm, and we'll just skip through the line and basically say, yeah, the only point you would want to Ash is basically Chi, but this gets chain blocked by Moyi. So we have Chain Link 1, Chi, Chain Link 2, Moyi. And there is no incentive not to do this Chain Link order because you get to choose the target you add off of Chi after you resolve Moyi. So for example, let's say in my current hand, I want to maybe search Longwan, but I could draw into Longwan with Moyi. So I would intuitively want to go like Moyi Chainlink 2 to see if I can draw into Longwan. And if I do, I'll just, I'll just add Blackout instead, for example. Yeah. Can't really Ash Taya either. So, Special Summon Tenyi, link that off, Normal Summon Taya, Banish Guy, Special Summon Chi, and then we have Chain Link 1, Chi, Chain Link 2, Taya. And we can't Ash Blossom Joe Spring here, making our hand trap completely obsolete. And then, when we just do some basic maths with this, it gets really annoying here, I guess. So let's say we're not dealing with combo anymore and we're dealing with stun. So here is what it kind of looks like. So let's say, well, it doesn't really matter too much, the exact format, but we'll say our opponent has, well, since you're playing stun, you can run basically just consistency cards like draw cards, prosp, all of that. So you're running, let's say, 36 floodgates, so you're always guaranteed to open one. So 100% consistency on having more or less always a floodgate of some sort. And we'll just say it's always going to be a super oppressive one on par with like Skill Drain or like Tikaboo. Inspector Border, that type of thing. Fossil Dino, whatever. So now the odds of you opening, so we'll go with specifically a back row floodgate in this case. The odds of you already opening a Harpy's Feather Duster, this is going to be dependent on how many copies of the Feather Duster you have. So let's say we have one copy. So we'll just go with this example to start. Our opponent here will always have a floodgate. Our odds of having this single copy of Harpy's Feather Duster in our starting hand is going to be 10%. Okay? And of course, you have to be aware that your opponent, of course, also has copies of Solemn Judgment. And if they do have Solemn Judgment, what are the odds now of our Harpy's Feather Duster resolving? So, assuming there was no Solemn Judgment, it would be 10%, aligning with our odds of drawing said Harpy's Feather Duster. But now our opponent has 3 copies of Solemn Judgment, so they have a 30% chance of getting a Solemn Judgment if we disregard all of their draw cards and like Prosp, which actually has a very high chance, well, of allowing your opponent to get into Solemn Judgment if you account for opening Solemn Judgment or opening Prosperity and then Prosperity actually revealing the Solemn Judgment. So that's kind of cracked. But yeah, Harpy's Feather Duster versus Solemn Judgment. Now, you'd think this would be pretty bad, but actually, this only about halves your odds. So like, it goes to 6% from 10%, because there's a 30% chance to open Solemn Judgment. I guess if we're assuming they have to open it instead of drawing into it or prosping into it, duality into this, whatever, right? Which we're not accounting for here. So 6%, I mean, that's not that big of a drop off, but then you have to consider, oh wait, how often? Are we able to dust our opponent if we're matchmaking into stun all the time? Well, in this case, it's about 1 in 20 games, so about 19 in 20 games, we just straight up lose because we can't do anything about like the skill drain. That's insane interaction for 20 games, don't you think? But all right, let's go bump up our Harpy's Feather Dusters now. So it is once again a 30% chance for us to open a Harpy's Feather Duster. So assuming no Solemn, that's 30% odds of having a Duster and being able to remove back row. So even if we just take this into account, there is 1 in 3 chance we essentially have Duster, and then 2 out of 3 of those games, well, we just have absolutely nothing. And we can't do anything. So we're absolutely cooked the majority of the time already, without accounting for Solemn. But yeah, Solemn Judgment will lower this percentage down by a further, in this case, it'll be 10%. So lower our percentage here to 20%. So it'll go down to 1 in 5. Except the odds are actually lower because, as I mentioned earlier, you have draw cards and you actually have more cards that can actually protect skill drain than just Solemn Judgment, actually. So we have that Albaz card that I can't remember the name of. The one that is able to protect itself and just protect everything in general. So let's take a look at that card. Let's see. Decisive Battle of Golgonda. This is soft once per turn, protects all of your cards from destruction. So, yeah, if your opponent were to have, for example, 2 Decisive Battle of Golgonda and then like a single skill drain, you would have to unironically activate Harpy's Feather Duster like 3 times. And you would have to not only have those cards in your deck, but you would also have to have opened up like all 3 copies. And yeah, that's how difficult it would be to remove just like a single back row floodgate, basically. So yeah, that's miserable. Yeah. But realistically, I'd say like even with 3 copies, you could be down to 10% odds of being able to out like a skill drain with any of your given hands, even if you hard main deck certain types of back row, depending on the exact kind of like format. So for example, at the very start of Master Duel, it's actually even worse because for some reason, Imperial Order was legal. So if we just look at this, 4 copies of this, and then all of the consistency cards, all of the like there were like 3 copies of Prosperity, I believe. And then you have like so many different draw cards that you can use for stun that were like super viable. So if they were actually planning around like a duster, if you had one, then you're cooked, basically. So that's messed up, I guess. But then you have to consider flipping the script on its head once again. So as you can imagine, like stun is like just capital B, capital S, right? So now if we flip the script, all of these cards are actually completely useless going second for the most part. Well, it depends on the exact cards, but for example, if we were to just drop a big Chengying, just a 3k Chengying, this can be completely unoutable by stun. They would have to do the same thing they did to you here, in which case they would have to like main deck, for example, Raigeki, and then they would have to open specifically that Raigeki for the Chengying. So in which case, let's assume we're literally just passing on Chengying and just sitting on Chengying for pretty much the rest of the game and doing no other actions. Our opponent would then still have to hard draw like removal in order to have the Chengying. But it's probably even worse if we were to have just lethal on board already, so just 8k or 10k attack points worth of just monsters. You would have to have like Raigeki on the spot. So yeah, basically take all the math we did for Harpy's Feather Duster and reverse it for just like a Raigeki, basically. Yeah, isn't that fun? Completely just relying on, more or less, if you just open combo, I guess, or open the exact out, simply draw the out. It's not advice, it's the only thing you can do. So yeah, that's kind of an issue right now. And a further issue is just basically we can break this all down, and well, a lot of this down to just bad consistency. And because of consistency, a lot of decks feel like they're not even that playable. So for example, if we were to go back to the standard ban list and then we go to Ryzeal, right? We're going to automatically build a Ryzeal list. It's going to be like fine. It's not going to necessarily be the best version, but all right. Let's draw 5 sample cards. Did we open a starter? We opened 2 starters. This is like the best hand the deck can produce. Okay, now, did we open a starter here? No, not really. We just have 7 Tachyon. So we're lucky here that we opened the 1 of Called By, but if this gets like ashed, we're completely cooked. But you know what would still cook us? Infinite impermanence. There's absolutely nothing we can do about that. We've called by the grave, and then we have some hand traps, some bricks. If you actually look at Ryzeal right now, worth mentioning, I suppose, is that your Ryzeal engine, if we disregard like Bonfire and Seven Tachyon specifically, the amount of engine cards you have and bricks from playing your engine, it's actually the same. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards. So this is just an absolute bricky, inconsistent mess at the moment. So yeah, this hand dies to a single Ash Blossom. This hand dies to a single, like, any hand trap, basically. This hand, you can't even play, like, if you had no opponent. This hand, you can't play if you had no opponent with this hand as well. This hand is just okay. Yeah, it's not that insane, not that bad, it's fine. Let's see. Yeah, it's fine. This hand, unplayable. This hand, unplayable. This hand is unplayable if your opponent has a single hand trap as well. Yeah. How about this one? Unplayable if your opponent has like a hand trap for your cards, basically. And as you can see, like, most hands are going to be like that. So not only do you have to draw the out, you have to draw a play to begin with as well, just in general. So the probability of drawing a starter here in this deck, I believe all of these are just 1-card starters, and the consistency is still this terrible, by the way, just throwing that out there. But okay. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 starters in this specific list. So you just take 8 and divide it by 40, I guess? Or was it 40 divided by 8? Well, yeah. Well, no, wait. That's for something else. But that would be the odds of top decking a single starter, I believe. But yeah. To open a single starter here, I think it's around maybe 60% odds of just having a starter. If we're going with like a Ryzeal specific starter, like just a Ryzeal starter with no need to search it, there's like a 50% chance, and maybe like around a 70% chance to have any starter. So just one in 3 games you don't even have option to normal summon Ice Ryzeal, for example, and you just have all hand traps basically. I don't really know how to calc for, like, if you open 2 Ryzeal cards. I would have to plug that in a calculator. I can't really estimate that, but yeah. The math on this, it's basically just going to be terrible regardless. And if we're just considering like playing essentially single player here with this specific list that the game gave us, the math is completely awful on this, and I think Malice is a little bit better in regards to like consistency versus the trash that is now Ryzeal, because your bricks or garnets or whatever you want to call them are not nearly as bad. Being able to be used for things like you can set MTP07 or TB11, and you can still use them. It's just like they wouldn't be as good as, for example, I guess Malice and Underground. But yeah, that's the general idea here. A card is either going to be the most disgusting card ever concocted, or it does absolutely nothing. So Shifter, response to Shifter, nothing. Special summon Unicorn, okay. Activate Maxi, set 5 pass. Activating Called by the Grave, being impossible because your opponent is activating Bestial Magnamut. So it feels like, to an extent, you're just playing a little bit of roulette here. like hand trap roulette. Does my hand trap work against what my opponent is playing? Yes or no? Well, if no, then I lose and I can't do anything. Except that's not step one. Step one is opening the card to begin with. So, like Called by the Grave, my opponent has Shifter, which my deck cannot beat or stop at all. Did I open my One of Ciphering Gamma? Because that's like the only thing that can legitimately stop a Shifter, assuming you are going second. And we're going to assume here you will completely lose the game here if you cannot stop the Shifter. So maybe your opponent does something like, I don't know, special summon Kashtira Unicorn, or they start doing a Fluandrees combo. In which case, Fluandrees, if they weren't nerfed by the one of map here, they're actually extremely hand trap resistant. So you don't even really have the option of hand trapping either Cash or Flu. So they're both hand trap resistant in different ways. But with specifically Kashtira, you have the idea that like your Unicorn is going to be able to activate like at least two to three times before your opponent is allowed to do any sort of play. So you just murder their extra deck so they can't play, essentially. And also, of course, the Unicorn stays on the field, so you get two activations of attempting to combo off of just the Unicorn, basically. So that would be just opening Unicorn and not accounting for if you open, for example, like Unicorn plus Theosis or Unicorn plus Birth or Rise Heart plus Birth, for example, which allows you to get into more stuff. So just imagine we have activate shifters, but normal summon Rise Heart. Rise Heart banishes Unicorn, activating Birth, special summoning Unicorn, and then the only response you have to this, all of this nonsense is Ash Blossom Joe Spring. So you Ash the Unicorn, you get ripped once. You try to perform some sort of play, your opponent hand traps you back with like an imperm or something. You have no play that, or you can't really do anything under shifter. So whatever you do, they'll just be able to Unicorn here, and then they'll be able to attempt Unicorn again next turn. And they also get to top deck a card. So if they normal summon something like, we'll say Fenrir, then you've completely lost at this point. And they have like game on board. And even if not, your extra deck is going to be down like 3 cards minimum. And then technically on your next turn, they'll be able to banish again, getting them up to like 4 banishes on your extra deck. And that's without considering, I guess, this card, funnily enough. Diablosis the Mind Hacker. So that's fun. I suppose. Is this off once per turn? Oh, this effect is off once per turn. Funny. Well, alright. If we just go through, like, we could go through, like, any card and show how it can be completely useless in a lot of situations. Like, if we actually go back to that Ryziel list, actually. Yeah. Just go back to the Ryziel list real quick. Like, with Ryziel, there's some RNG involved, but let's say you're going first Ryziel. You drop, like, well, if we're looking insane consistency hits here, if you opened 2 of like pretty much any Ryziels, or well, any of your Ryziel starters here, if we were to go like Ice plus Sword, it takes 3 hand traps to shut down here, and then if your opponent has 2 hand traps, you still have like combo no matter where your opponent hand traps you. So yeah, it's completely cooked. That's how it feels to play against Ryziel. But at the same time, if you're going second, you're just going to get cast steamrolled because your opponent can set up more interactions than you have cards in your hand. So you'll still lose going second, essentially. And you get cooked just that way. And then there is also consideration of your ability to play into back row or against back row is actually still terrible in this list, because like you have just Plasma Hole for back row removal pretty much, and then you have like maybe some sort of card like Light Dragon at Ignister or Tornado Dragon. to pop a single back row, which then can be chained because you don't really have a good option to deal with back row. You can't like move it really well or anything. Aside from specifically the trap, you have like X Ryziel for back row, but this doesn't actually work against just normal traps. This only really works against con traps, and anything aside from a con trap isn't really possible to deal with using X Ryziel. And this doesn't actually account for, well, other floodgates as well. Like, for example, Tikaboo, Rivalry, all that stuff can prevent you from special summoning X Ryziel. And then we have the idea of, okay, but what if your opponent has two skill drains? You can only negate one of them with the Mirror Logic Aggregator, and you can only do this once. So, yeah, that's kind of cooked, isn't it? So, yeah, I mean, the game, I guess we can just simply say game is super imbalanced. And one of the things that have improved a lot recently compared to before actually is just consistency, where straight up, I remember playing decks where there was like a 50 or 60% chance that I would open a normal summon related to my combo. And if I didn't have it, I just wouldn't have it, and I would just have to pass turn. Like straight up, that was what you would have going on a lot around the start of Master Duel. Actually, in terms of consistency, you just pass because you have nothing, and you can't even make a play. Like, assuming you treat the game as a single player game, you'd get a hand like this. And yeah, I mean, you have one play, it gets hand trapped, can't do nothing. That's basically how it goes, I guess. That's the general idea anyways, so yeah. That, or you just don't have a play at all, like in one of the earlier hands where we only drew like either bricks or hand traps. So yeah. If we look at what interruptions are available as well, those interruptions are also kind of RNG. Yeah, like Nibiru does nothing. If we look at Apollosa doesn't actually do anything against F5 pass legitimately, right? Apollosa, so oppressive. Skill drain, even more oppressive than Apollosa, arguably. Can't do anything. And even like in mirrors, there are times where you can't even interact with the same deck. So we'll just go with this example with like Paleo. So let's assume we're both playing like Paleo. If you open Oleanoids, you can now target a spell trap card on the field to destroy it, but yeah, this is the only form of back row removal you realistically have, because it's a normal trap deck. But yeah, we could just blind pick a card, and let's assume it was a good hit, like we hit maybe Durma Karma Cannon. Then your opponent could do what's called absolutely nothing, draw a card, set that card, and the Karma Cannon's replaced, basically. There's also the idea of course, blind pick a card. It was Morella. Chain Morella, send a card. And just throwing it out there, Dynamiscus only targets face-up cards. So even if you could afford the discard, you still can't target anything here. So your back row interaction, like just even back row doesn't interact with back row. And like sometimes monsters can't interact with other monsters. Like, I don't know, with Gimmick Puppet, Tenpai, you have cards that prevent that altogether. So you're kind of just staring at your opponent like, damn, I hope this singular hand trap I have might work. Or, damn, I wish I had a singular hand trap at least, so I had a chance against what my opponent is doing here. In which case, like, Ash against Tenpai or Purge could be fine also, I guess. So yeah, I mean, consistency, it's a bit of a struggle. And then like cards kind of have compatibility, which, you know, if your card is not good into your opponent, then it's essentially a card that's completely dead, and it makes you question like, why are you even running this? What was this card even doing? For example, Ghost or your Snow Rabbit. This card can be insanely cracked or completely useless. Same with like even Maxi for like a billion different reasons actually. So what if we activate Maxi and then we draw only into our brick cards essentially? So we draw Cross, we draw Star Ryziel, we draw like Node Ryziel, we just draw these guys. and we just can't play basically. Then on the flip side, there is Maxi instantly crushing it and drawing exactly what you need. And also, your opponent needs to special summon like a billion times, so they can't. If they don't play into Maxi at all, they end on nothing. But to end on like at least one interruption, they have to summon maybe 4 or 5 times or something. Which also coincidentally plays into Nibiru, which means that play is so insanely risky because your opponent could also draw into a Nibiru off of Maxi, and then they're just up so much advantage, and you just turbo lose. But then at the same time as well, like Maxi, what are the odds of this actually resolving if your opponent has like uh all of their copies of like Ash Blossom called by Crossout? Make it a completely useless card, making you just go -1 instead of being an actual more consistent play, like for example, Infinite Impermanence, which plays around at least called by and Ash Blossom, and only losing to the Crossout now, in which case like Maxi would lose to like literally all of these. So yeah, the game's kind of like not that balanced and kind of just feels sacky. And just even if you're playing absolutely perfect, the game is basically just determined by luck and whoever drew better to an extent. This is always going to be the case, but I feel like it doesn't have to be this insane, I guess, where it's just so consistently terrible with the probability here. Like for example, with outing a back row or a floodgate being like such insanely hard RNG. Like even if my opponent had just like a set Book of Moon, the fact that I actually can't do anything about it in Ryzeal except for like throw so many cards on the board that I can just ignore the Book of Moon. In which case, then we go to the flip side of, oh, now the Book of Moon is useless, right? So yeah, there's just no balance here. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Wait, actually, one last thing. Going first versus going second, like Ice Ryzeal, this converts into like maybe we'll just generously say like 9 interactions, and then assuming you throw like 1 hand trap at it, or you're going second with this, all of the interactions don't translate to board breaking, and also the size to 1 interaction becoming moot point and becoming like nothing, right? So if we go back here, right, yeah, we don't even have an Ice Ryzeal, but if we did have like another brick, nothing, aha, Ice Ryzeal. Oh, this would take till like nearly turn. Wait, what turn even is this? Like turn 11? Disgusting. But yeah, with Ice Ryzeal here, there's no follow up or anything, and if your opponent sets up like 9 interruptions on you, this dies to like just 1 anyways. So you're going to be completely cooked in this instance. So yeah, the game's just unfair in so many ways, I guess, like going first, going second disparity, and then there's like well, just card compatibility that you can't really fully guess in Master Duel because yeah, it's just complete RNG if you have the right cards against the right deck, and then if you won or lost the coin flip because certain cards are better in certain cases, like talents, I guess. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.